And I certainly know how passionate I am, and Harry and I see the world so similarly in our approach of being very hands-on with things.
She points to her work ethics and humility as she describes how she started working at the age of 13. I worked all my life, as it's sensitive to her to get across. Meghan's audibly uncomfortable with the question she's asked.
Meghan, you touched on it before. It's well known, you've championed the empowerment of women and young girls and promoting their self-worth. How do you hope to continue that work with the Royal Foundation?
Yes, I mean, I think that knowing that I've just been here for 3 months, right? And in that amount of time, but with that said, for me, it's very important to, once you hit the ground running, even if you're doing it quietly behind the scenes, which is what I've focused my energy on thus far, is meeting with the right people, meeting with the right organizations behind the scenes quietly, learning as much as I can so that I can maximize the opportunity we have here to really make an impact.
The interviewer asked her a so-called presupposition question, where she presupposes that Meghan has an answer. Presupposition questions are different from yes-no questions that have a shorter format. Rather than giving a direct answer to the question, Meghan makes a longer preface, a lead-in. This lead-in's obviously sensitive to her, since it's the first thing on her mind. First, there's a turn-initial delay, which suggests that the question's problematic in one way or another, probably because she wasn't prepared for it. Then there's a hesitation marker in form of an interjection. She then says yes, even though she wasn't asked a yes-no question, and she uses the hedge I mean, which gives her additional time before she says that she's only been there for 3 months. She laughs while saying this, but this type of laughter indicates self-awareness or nervousness. Laughter is often used when a person's uncomfortable with something, but it's also used to correct the other speaker. Meghan's statement sounds like a reminder to the interviewer and everyone else in the room, and simultaneously functions as an excuse. She uses the pronoun you, which generalizes and normalizes what she's saying. In this case, that it is in fact possible to do something quietly behind the scenes. She sets this normalization frame before she switches to the personal pronoun I, emphasizing her own experience. With thus far, she puts a time restriction on her efforts. It's implied that there'll be a time when she focuses her energy elsewhere, most likely focusing on something public. She repeats the phrase behind the scenes quietly, so this is obviously sensitive to her to get across. Again, this sounds like a way of countering possible objections. Overall, this passage has a self-protective function. In this context, self-protective statements are often observed when the person feels that they haven't done much or enough work, or that they feel inferior to the other people on stage, or both.
I guess we wait a couple months and then we can hit the ground running. But up until then, I'm pretty excited.
But like you said, I mean, you've been here for 3 years. Yeah, wedding first. Get that done.
We can multitask.
Given the interviewer's closing assessment, it's Meghan's words about the wedding that ended up being the most essential outcome of her answer. The question that the interviewer asked was largely avoided, and the way Meghan starts and ends her answer reveals that it wasn't the main focus.
Knowing that I've just been here for 3 months, right? I guess we wait a couple months and then we can hit the ground running. But up until then, I'm pretty...
Next, the interviewer parrots Meghan's words about working behind the scenes quietly, and notice Meghan's answer.
Having said that, you have been quietly, like you say, behind the scenes, let's just say laying the foundations for your future work. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sadly, I can't.
Can you tell us a bit more about
Meghan's turn-initial delay and the smacking sound suggest that this is yet another dispreferred question. People often laugh when they know that they've given or another person's given a dispreferred answer, to avoid embarrassment.
But I will say, you know, if we know how And I certainly know how passionate I am, and Harry and I see the world so similarly in our approach of being very hands-on with things. What I can say is that I have been fortunate enough to meet with some incredible women and organizations in general in the UK that are doing work here, but then also knowing that some of the work that I've done in the past has been in Commonwealth countries like Rwanda, India. So this reach, I think, can have some really nice legs to it once we can start. But
with her vowel stress on the verbs will and can, she shows us that she feels the need to say something, that it would be embarrassing not to. Her short association with Harry about their shared view on the world sounds like she doesn't want to be alone with the question. With the words, the work that I've done, the association with Harry is gone, and she now highlights her efforts. In other words, she switches from the personal pronoun we to I. Now, Meghan's asked how she's experienced the work from afar.
Meghan, what did you make of it watching from afar?
I think probably the same sentiment that most people had. Obviously happening here, the stigmatization surrounding mental health is different and unique in every territory. But I was in Canada at the time, and I just remember how much news coverage it was getting. And just in that alone, it was getting such a conversation point happening amongst people. And I think, again, to the point that they've all touched on earlier, it was because of that togetherness, because you had so many different organizations under this umbrella, and each of them is shining this spotlight on it. So I think in North America, at least from that standpoint, I remember it being a very large point of conversation, and I would imagine in other countries as well. It made such a huge impact. It was very impressive to watch from afar.
Again, she starts her answer by sounding surprised.
I think...
She makes a self-repair, a self-initiated interruption of an utterance. She then uses the hitch, I think, indicating probability rather than certainty, before she associates with most people, as she says. Before she mentions her own experience about being in Canada at the time, it's obviously sensitive to her to first make her point through other people. She seizes the opportunity to give her own narrative. In a context like this, narratives serve at least two purposes. One, to give positive details about the writer, and two, to make readers empathize with and ideally recognize themselves in the writer. She writes that she grew up on the $5 salad bar at Sizzler, and that it may have cost less back then, and that she honestly can't remember. Meghan writes that she does remember the feeling of eating out, that because she knew how hard her parents worked, eating out was something special, and she felt lucky. Here, she stresses the presumed fact that life hasn't always been easy for her. This is an important point to make for a writer whose income exceeds most by far, and whose lifestyle is quite different from the very same people she's trying to associate with. Also, another positive detail about her is revealed: gratitude. In this case, feeling lucky when eating out. 2 times she uses feel words. She says that she remembers the feeling and that she felt lucky. And feeling is exactly the purpose of this passage. Pathos, appeal to emotion and pity. Meghan says that as a scout, when her troop wanted to celebrate, it was back to that same salad bar, because that's what those families could afford to do too. Here, the alignment continues. Meghan associates with other families at that time, and this is exactly her point with this letter as well, to associate with present-day families in order to advocate for paid leave. Thus, she makes the past match the present. Also, she gets to tell another positive detail about herself, that she was a scout. The positive details continue, but in an indirect fashion. She points to her work ethics and humility as she describes how she started working at the age of 13 and worked different jobs to cover odds and ends. I worked all my life, as it's sensitive to her to get across. People in our country work incredibly hard. The noun people makes this a general address. seeking to include everyone, more or less.